Good. I know there's still people coming in, but I wouldn't like to delay the start further, Nicci. So I'm just going to get ready so that I can introduce Nicci properly to everybody, and Nicci will then take over and introduce the session to everybody as well. So I met Nicci, joined our community quite some time ago, and then because our guest speaker calendar is booked in advance, Nicci put her name down some time ago, and we finally met up a couple of weeks ago, and it was one of the, I must say, one of those moments that stands out for me, Nicci, when you meet mind-like, abundance mindset kind of people in our community. And then we started chatting about what Nicci is going to talk about. And we are particularly excited about this talk because operational excellence or operational management is something that we do tend to avoid. I know I'm one of those people, but it's essential to achieve operational excellence to help us grow and also take our business to the next level. So just a reminder to please mute yourselves. I'm going to officially introduce Nicci to you. Nicci started her career in the communications field in 1999. During this time, she gained experience in various sectors, advertising, public relations, and stakeholder communications, including running her own communication company for about 6 years. In 2015, she shifted her focus to the entrepreneurial space, and we're so happy you did, Nicci. Her primary objective is to grow the entrepreneurial ecosystem, to support the development and growth of businesses. Please do mute yourself if you don't mind. Thank you very much for that. And then what she then started doing in this new space into growing the entrepreneurial ecosystem, she supports the development and growth of businesses, entrepreneurial businesses. So she consults directly to small and growing businesses with a particular focus in operations and works with ecosystem players to help create programs and structures that support entrepreneurial growth. Now, Nicci holds 2 diplomas in marketing and public relations. She's a graduate from the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women Program for Female Entrepreneurs and is a regular speaker at local and international events. Now, that got me very excited, Nicci. So thank you very much for joining us. And on that note, Nicci, we're handing over to you. Enjoy the session, everybody.
Thank you, Liesl. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Sure, yeah, it was a wonderful moment to connect with you and the team at ExoFutures because I love what you're doing, and I think democratizing entrepreneurship is one of the most important things that we can achieve. But today I want to speak to you about achieving excellence through operational growth. And the reason why I have focused on operations is because it's something that is often lacking in entrepreneurs' skill sets or even in their desire. Entrepreneurs tend to be visionaries. They tend to be these incredible people who can see into the future and imagine things that the rest of us can't imagine. But we don't necessarily want to get involved in the day-to-day running of the business and the nitty-gritty and all of that kind of thing. But that's what really excites me. So that was why I created this course. And it's really, it doesn't matter whether you're a solopreneur, if you're an early stage business, or whether you developed sort of a more developed business. These formulas and frameworks that I'm going to tell you about today will apply to you, even if it means maybe taking a step back and relooking things or embedding them in the beginning. So just to, Liesl has introduced me, so I don't need to go through that. Just to give you an overview of the approach that I use, there are sort of 3 pillars that I work with. It's really around identifying the objectives, the challenges, the potential challenges, what could come up, where the opportunities are. We then move into the pillar of solving. So what actions do we need to take to solve these challenges, these issues? And also what actions do we need to take to achieve these things? And then we move into the implementation phase, which is often the most important phase and the time where things get broken, and that's where things often fall apart. So looking at a plan to get things done, to assign those responsibilities, to look at those deadlines, and really get all of those things nicely in place so that our visions actually happen. So the first area that I'm going to start with is around strategy implementation. And the reason why I focus on implementation as opposed to the actual strategy development is because generally entrepreneurs either have a strategy or an idea, a vision of where they want to go. They do have a strong objective. You know what you want to achieve, but it's that gap, as I said, in getting it done. So the first thing that I want you to consider is that when you want to implement an objective, let's use something very simple, very straightforward, because in this time with COVID and everything that has happened, our objectives are often very simple and we want to keep them straightforward. So let's say we want an objective of growing our revenue by 50% over the next financial year. The first thing you need to consider is, how does this affect 4 key areas of your business? And maybe there are more depending on your business and what sort of industry you're in, but these are the main ones that I've identified, because this objective actually touches all of these key areas. And if you don't consider them, you're going to have a problem. So first we need to look at people and culture. What are the current skills that you have in place versus the required skills? If you are looking at moving into becoming a tech-enabled and a much more digital business, are your people skilled to handle that? Do you have people that are digitally minded, or do you need to fill those gaps? What is your current capacity versus your required capacity? Your cultural alignment with the vision and strategy. So if I get back to the example of growing your business by 50%, what's going to happen with capacity when you suddenly throw 50% more work at the people that are in your business? Is everybody going to just be put under massive pressure, and suddenly you're going to have people breaking, they're going to be experiencing burnout, they're going to be dropping balls left, right, and center because they just can't cope with the amount of work? Do they have the skills that you need to bring in all this extra business? Maybe you looking at expanding into different markets to bring in this extra 50%. Do they have the skills to deal with those kind of markets? Is your culture of your business aligned with this level of growth? Are your people driven, focused, and they want to grow the business, or are they more comfortable and want to maintain the status quo? So you can see just with looking at this one section, how when we start peeling back all of these layers, it becomes quite complex, and something as simple as saying, I want to grow my revenue, is actually not as simple and straightforward as it seems. And then we move into operations and technology, which is my favorite area. So you need to look at what your operational efficiency is and how are your current operations going to manage all of the extra work. Is there maybe, are you running completely efficiently at the moment? Because if you add additional work, those systems might not be able to still be as efficient as they seem. And there might be bottlenecks that you're not aware of. Do you have operational targets? Are you aware of what these targets are? Do you know what your turnaround is on delivering projects, on manufacturing products? What is your operational capacity? Once again, looking at the current capacity versus the required capacity. And what are your technology requirements? So if you suddenly introduce a brand new technology that is going to digitize a lot of things, are your systems geared up to handle that? And what is the change management process going to be? So there might be an initial dip in your operations while people are getting used to this technology and settling in, and there's a change management process that's happening. So you can start to see how, while these things are all categorized under their own sort of broad headings, they actually are all interlinked, and they're sort of like puzzle pieces where they all actually have to fit together, because if they don't, that's when things can fall apart. So technology requirements, how is that going to impact your staff? If you suddenly introduce new technology, will they be able to handle it? How will they cope? Will they just resist and go back to the manual system? It's going to affect your operations. It's going to affect your target of improving your income. So when we look at finance and profit, what are the current resources available versus your required resources? So if you are going to increase your profit by launching a new product, by selling a new product, what is that going to cost you? Do you need to bring in more staff to help with business development? Do you need to develop this product, or is it already developed? So understanding the budgets around those and what the actual financial implications are of this goal. So you've got your financial targets in place, or maybe you don't. Do you understand what kind of money you need to earn? And what are your current revenue streams versus new revenue streams? So there are a lot of questions, and I often find there's a very famous saying, and I have no idea if it's true or not, that Richard Branson claims he can't read a balance sheet. And I have a lot of entrepreneurs throwing that back at me as a reason why they don't necessarily understand their financials and why they don't get involved in those kind of things. And my response to them, and my response to anybody who's thinking that today, is I can guarantee you Richard Branson knows whether or not he's making money and how to make money. Whether or not he can read a balance sheet is irrelevant. He knows what he needs to charge people, and he knows exactly how much money he needs to achieve things. So understanding your financials and getting comfortable with that is really, really important. And it really will help you budget correctly, achieve your goals correctly. And if you realize that you do need things like investment, finances is one of the key areas that they focus on, because that's what investors are looking for ultimately. So then we move into our fourth area of strategy implementation, which looks at clients and growth. And these are things that, yes, we all consider new business when you talk about growing your revenue, but have you considered what the potential impact is on your current clients? So if you suddenly bringing in a lot of corporate clients when you've been servicing smaller clients, is that going to shift the balance? And are your current clients maybe going to go, oh no, you've outgrown me, I need to leave? Or maybe you have outgrown them and you actually do need to replace them. But what does that mean for your income? Because remember, you want to hit that target that you're working towards. So understand that balance. And I have been asked before if it's worthwhile actually having that conversation with your clients. And personally, I think within reason, if you are the kind of business that has a small number of clients, so not like retail or manufacturing a lot of the time, where you could potentially have hundreds of clients and you can't necessarily communicate with each of them, it's definitely worthwhile having that conversation and just saying to people, we are growing, this is our vision, this is what we want to do, put a positive spin on it, share the benefits for them. Keep them informed so that they don't suddenly go onto your website and see all these corporate logos and think, oh my word, I'm now completely intimidated. I need to move on. So when you look at new business development, are you growing existing, or are you getting new clients in? What does that balance look like? Or are you going to develop new products? So there are all these areas that you have to think about. And there could potentially be other areas in your business that you might want to add onto here. Partnerships might be something that you need to consider, collaboration, looking at the risk of certain things. So when you've broken this down, I mean, I've spent the last, just over 10 minutes, actually just talking to you about how you are going to achieve a goal of reaching 50% more revenue. So understanding that there's a lot more planning that goes into these things than what we initially think. So how do we go about getting all of this stuff done? Because you're probably feeling slightly overwhelmed by now, like, oh my word, I'm never ever going to achieve this, and what's going to happen? So that's why I've got this lovely implementation plan. And the reason why almost every single template or document that I produce puts on the company vision and or purpose. So if you have a separate purpose, or if they're in one, if you call it a mission, that's absolutely fine. And the reason why I put these on documents is to constantly remind people of why we are here, why we exist as a business. What purpose do we want to serve? Just keep reminding people about that. So when they look at this and think, oh my word, I've got to do all of this stuff, and how am I going to fit it in, and what's going to happen, I can go back and refer to why I'm doing this. So then we look at the BHAG, which for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a big, hairy, audacious goal. And this actually is a strategic planning methodology. And it's just one that I like because I think it helps you to think big. But there are a lot of other methodologies, so you can fill that in as you see fit. And then we look at the elements of this action plan. So I've got my 4 key business areas on the left-hand side that align with what I've just spoken about. So clients and growth, operations and technology, finance and profits, and people and culture. Then we move into the next column, which looks at what we want to achieve under each of these areas. So let's say, for instance, we're working to grow our profit by 50%. And within that, we realize that we are going to need a new business development person and a new account manager, for argument's sake. The strategic objective under that would then be to upskill, to increase our staff complement, or possibly you've identified somebody who needs to be upskilled. So that's how we work the strategic objectives, and we break those down into the various areas. Operations, maybe we've realized we need new technology to help support the additional work. So that would be a strategic objective. The key performance indicators will actually be a breakdown of what needs to be done under each of those areas. So we need to employ more people. The key performance area would be the recruitment of those people, identifying who they are, interviewing them, putting the ad out, all of those kind of processes. And then we break that down into quarterly goals. And you can work this however you like. Maybe you only want to work for 1 quarter. So these then become monthly goals. So instead of Q1, 2, 3, and 4, you have month 1, 2, 3, 4. Whatever works for you. I think generally with strategic planning, we need to kind of think a little bit further in advance. So I would work on a year, but if a year is a bit much for you and you're just starting out, or you're just completely overwhelmed, just stick with monthly. Just work with whatever works for you. But the trick is to actually break those goals down into bite-sized chunks. So quarter 1 could be putting out the ad and getting in the CVs. Quarter 2, we're going to start interviewing and creating a short list and maybe looking at some sort of aptitude test or something like that. And then we look at appointing somebody in quarter 3, so that it really becomes digestible and you don't end up in that stage where, and I know I tend to, get into this sometimes, where you throw everything at this and it's like, oh my word, I need to appoint somebody and I need to do the ad, get in the CVs, do the interviews, do the aptitude test, appoint them, get their job description, get all of the sorts out, and it needs to be done by the end of the week and it's Friday. So it really just helps you break these things down, spread them out over time, because chances are if I put myself in that situation where I'm throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it, I get completely overwhelmed. And then it's like, oh, well, okay, I'm just actually going to go for lunch and think about all of this. And come Monday, I still haven't done anything. So it just helps you break, eating an elephant one bite at a time. It breaks them down. And it also helps the people that you are working with understand what needs to be done. And then this becomes a really cool check-in process that you can do every month or every quarter, whatever works for you, just to make sure people are on track. So then when we look at our initiatives, these would generally be if you're launching new products. So what are the programs that you need to bring in? Are there specific products that you're launching? What is the process around that? And more importantly, what are the budgets? So if you're talking about employing somebody, maybe you wouldn't necessarily have anything in the program column, but you would need a budget. How much money have I got to spend on LinkedIn advertising, to spend on aptitude tests, to consider all of those sort of areas? But if there are specific programs that you need people to achieve, that's where you would list them. So I've tried to make this plan as generic as possible to cover a broad number of businesses and a broad number of business stages. But please work with these things however it suits you. So before we get into the process section, I just want to check if anybody has any questions or if there are any comments or any thoughts that you have around strategy implementation. Yeah, Paul, I'm also a big fan of SMART guidelines. I think it helps us check ourselves to make sure that these things are realistic, because often, I mean, I've got a wonderful tendency to do this. I set these fabulous goals, and when I actually break it down, it's like, how, you know, I'm going to improve myself. And then suddenly I think, well, how am I ever going to measure self-improvement? What do I actually need to do? So huge fan of SMART goals. And SMART goals is also one of the, it is a strategic planning methodology. So those of you who are feeling overwhelmed just by the concept of strategic planning, just consider that it's goal setting at its very basic format. It's actually just setting goals. So you don't need to be completely overwhelmed by the process. It's actually not necessary. It's not this big fancy process where you need all sorts of fancy frameworks and that kind of thing to get it done.
Nicci, I see Craig has his hand raised. Craig?
Thanks, Liesl. So Nicci, I'm just thinking, you know, one of the things that we've got on the backlog in terms of a knowledge nugget that we want to create is on cash flow management. And you know, so when you talk about a budget, it's very important that you attach, and you've said it, but I just want to emphasize it, that you attach every single cost to the revenue that you anticipate, and then that you really make do lots of validation of your assumptions about the revenue. You know, because if the revenue doesn't come in, then what do you do about the cost? And we're going to build a masterclass around cash flow management that goes into that kind of level of your ability to drive your growth really attached to the financial metrics and the financial goals. So you know, and then of course in all of your areas there are cost implications and revenue implications. So we can you know, give people that kind of very strong financial perspective, and cash flow is a better way to get a short-term handle on the business than a balance sheet, as an example. So that was just the thought I had.
Yeah, absolutely, Craig. Thanks very much for that. And it actually, I'm going to share a case study with you shortly that feeds quite nicely into what Craig has just said, and understanding the importance around strong financial management and strong cash flow management to make sure that you are quoting correctly, you considered all of your costs, and you've taken all of those things into account. So Craig, thanks very much for that.
There's a quick question from Danielle. Sorry, just in case you didn't see that, because it literally just popped up. So Danielle is all the way from Cameroon, and we've got people from
welcome
everywhere. So just from Danielle, what is the difference between KPIs and the quarterly targets? So key performance indicators and quarterly targets.
Thanks very much for that. Sure, I'm feeling all international here, speaking to people all over the world. I love it. So Danielle, the difference would be a quarterly target is something that the company or the department would want to achieve. So let's get back to the example, 50% revenue growth. So in quarter one, let's say we want to achieve 25% revenue growth as a business. So that would be the quarterly target. A KPI is a key performance indicator. It can also sort of fall into the key performance area. It becomes something that's more individual. So if we're looking at quarter one, 25% revenue growth, that's our overall quarterly target. Danielle, for you as the salesperson, that means you will need to achieve $100,000 in revenue. So that becomes your key area. So for operations, me as the operations person, I would need to get the technology that will help us streamline our operations. So when you bring in all this new business, we can handle it. So the quarterly target sort of almost sits as the umbrella, And then the KPIs become the individual actions underneath that. Does that make sense to you? And as Liesl says, minimum viable goals, fail fast and adjust fast, and measure performance on outcomes. Absolutely. So Danielle, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'm absolutely comfortable, Nicci. Thank you. And what I just have to precise is just I'm familiar with applying OKRs and KPIs. And as you just explained, I now understand that when you're talking about quarterly targets, it's all about the directional objective, which comes from the company. Why the KPIs here are the operational targets, the operational objectives. So thank you very much, Nicci.
Sure. I'm glad. That's great. That's a great question. And it's always important to clarify these things. Okay, cool. So now we're going to get into processes. And by the time I'm finished this section, you guys are going to all be waking up at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning screaming process, because I use the word so often in this section. So forgive me for that up front, but it is necessary. So the business reason why processes are important. You actually need them to grow a business. Processes form the foundation that looks at how everything works, how we all interact with each other, how information and work flows through the business. And if you don't have these right, your business is going to be built on a shaky foundation. And it makes it very difficult to scale and to grow, because you're not growing off a solid foundation. So once you've got these in place, it's easy to replicate them within different departments, different regions, within different individuals. So they really are growth, scalable, and efficiency reasons for having processes, because when people know what is expected of them, when they know exactly what they need to do, it makes life a lot easier, and they understand the boundaries that they can operate within, the decisions that they can make. If you need to, even if you're working as a solopreneur, you might think, well, why do I need processes? Because I understand everything. If you ever collaborate with somebody, or if you ever get in a virtual assistant, if you need one, or you decide to outsource your social media or anything like that, if you have those processes in place and written down, that whole handover process becomes a lot easier. So if Liesl and I are going to collaborate on a project for a joint client, and I'm the project lead, and I can say to her, Liesl, this is a document on how I deal with my clients. I respond to emails within 24 hours. I speak to them like this. You need to be aware that our mutual client is quite sensitive around these areas. So make sure you say, dear Nicci, as opposed to hi, or hi Nix, or don't get overly familiar. She likes cappuccino, so if you ever meet with her, buy her a cappuccino. It just makes that handover process a lot easier if you are a solopreneur. And if you're employing people, it really helps you get them onboarded as quickly as possible and understand what they need to do much faster. So the lag between employing somebody and having them become productive is much shorter. And then there's some business reasons why processes are very important. And there is a lot of research to back this up. So I'm not gonna get into that, but it's actually been proven that we are only capable of making so many decisions in a day. And there are a lot of articles that have been written about, I know Barack Obama was one, I think Steve Jobs, about why they always wore the same clothes. And it was actually linked to minimizing the amount of decisions that they needed to make in a day. So keep your brain and use it for the important decisions. If you have solid processes in your business, you don't have to wake up in the morning and think, oh, what do I need to do today? It's all done. It's all sorts of getting it done. A lot of them need a little bit of chaos, and they feel like they operate very well in that chaos. But it's also been proven that creative people who follow a set morning routine are more creative during the day. So give themselves the flexibility when they need it. But when it comes to a certain amount of structure. You have to get up, you have to eat breakfast, you have to exercise, you have to do these things, whatever your morning looks like. It actually makes us more creative individuals. If you're on this call, it makes you creative in various ways. By having this structure around us, it allows us to be more creative. And finally, I had to just throw this one in. If you have solid processes, your people know what they need to do. They know how it needs to be done, and they know when it needs to be done. It can give you a chance to take a breath and actually relax. And if they're not taking care of it, to readjust and to check things. But when there isn't a set process in place, it becomes quite difficult for you to have that conversation and tell people that they're going off track when they don't even know what track they're supposed to be on. So think about it from an employee's perspective. If I don't know what is expected of me, I can't deliver on it. So it does contribute towards the chaos. So just processes I'm a process nerd. So this stuff really does get me excited. But just think about it from that perspective, that there actually are, let's call them personal reasons why they're quite important to have in your business. So now, as I said earlier, when Craig brought up the issue of cash flow, I just want to share with you a quick case study. And this was a company that I worked with. It was a training company. And when I started working with them, we went through the financials and we discovered that they were actually running at a loss, but they didn't know why. And when we started peeling back the layers, sorry, just to take a step back, it's very easy to get judgmental and look at them and go, oh my word, how did you not know you were running at a loss and how could you not know why? But this happens very easily. And it can become when you're growing, when you're scaling a business, or even when you're just working with a small team or by yourself, it can be very easy to lose track of these things if you don't keep a handle on them, as Craig mentioned. So what we discovered was that their project managers weren't quoting correctly. They were taking their hard project costs, so the costs of the venue, I mean, this was still pre-COVID, the cost of the facilitators, the cost of producing the material, they were marking them up, let's just say by 50%. And the assumption was that they were making 50% on each project. Big mistake. As Craig said earlier, consider the impact of your financials on every area of your business. They were not taking into account their operational costs. The project manager was paid a salary. They had a desk. They had office space. They had phone bills. They had costs associated with them. There are costs associated with running a business. You might have a COO, somebody like me coming in. I'm not a billable cost to client, but it's a necessary cost that needs to be covered. Admin costs, the costs of finance people, the cost of the office, phone bills, there were all of these things that they weren't taking into account. So we actually had to sit down and break up all of these things and go, hang on, you are now actually way under quoting. So you think you're making a 50% profit, you're actually running at a loss. So how we fixed this was we worked very closely with the finance people and created a quoting process that involved creating a template. And part of this process was also getting finance involved in quoting. So before any quotes or proposals went to client, finance actually had a look at it and gave their input and approved it before it could go out. So the results were that there was an improvement in profitability and they did increase their income. But you also have to consider, and this is why we say running a business is not easy, but it's definitely worth it, because sometimes there are unintended consequences of these things. So now all of a sudden their costs had gone up and clients started pushing back on the increased costs. So it put them in a position where they needed to make key decisions around which clients they would lose, or which clients they were willing to lose, and which ones they would retain, potentially even as a loss leader, but it was beneficial to have them on their books. Which clients they would take the time, sit down, have these conversations with, talk them through, explain why the costs had gone up, or which clients they would just say, here's your quote, if you're not happy with it, we need to move on. But this is where you can see how having these really good processes in place actually helps you make better, more strategic decisions. Because all of a sudden, we're actually looking at our clients from a much higher level and going, this client is not worth it. This client is worth it. and making those really, really informed decisions, but not necessarily writing people off because we're not earning money from them. Maybe it's worth my while to have a particular government department because it helps me bring in other business. It's a great networking tool. It's good to have on my portfolio, but you're making an informed decision because you understand where you're coming from. So Paul has just made a comment here. Once a process is established, an SME can consider automating it. There are many free options like Zapier, Trello. The point is, once this shows maturity in an SME and helps establish value for a business, there's a key to scaling. So many benefits to standardizing process. Paul, you like my favorite person. I just love you right now. So you can stay. Because that's absolutely, so there's a lot of really cool free software out there. I will put a list of resources in the CRO toolkit, which I will share with you at a later stage after the masterclass. And one of the things it does have is things like Zapier, Trello, Asana, and a lot of these tools, they've got really, really cool features for free. So if you are just starting out and you are very price sensitive, you can actually use them and get a lot of functionality from them without having to pay, or they do have trial periods that you can use. You can grow with the software. So yeah, definitely look at what you can automate. So now we're going to kind of start touching on
Sorry, Nicci.
Yes, absolutely. Go for it, Craig. Mm-hmm.
Just two things. One, Liesel's having network issues. So I'm not sure where she is, but she sent me a telegram. So if there's something there, so I'll keep an eye on the chat as well.
Okay.
And just stand in as much as I can. But just going back to your previous slide and the point about, not understanding the cost of what you're selling. In the case study, the other way to fix that problem would have been to sell more. So the association of the price per seat and getting down to that kind of metric, and the metrics like the cost to acquire that customer in the seat. So maybe it was that they weren't spending enough on marketing actually, rather than that they were spending too much, or not understanding what they were spending. So very important to dissect the cost association with the revenue, and really look at whether you can actually, one, charge more, or two, because it sounded like they took the route of charging more. Maybe they could have charged less and sold more, So just that was a thought I had as you were going through that.
Absolutely. And Craig, thanks for that. So I think the thing that's key to understand here is also that, this was a 6-month process. So I'm giving you an overview in 5 minutes. This was a very lengthy process, and we did pick apart all those various options and understand that this was the best route for this particular company to go. So that's why, if go back to the very beginning when I first started this, we go through that whole process of identification, solving, and then implementing, because this is not a copy and paste. This worked for this particular business under these circumstances. That's not to say it's going to work with every single
very important
business.
The context of each case.
Absolutely. Craig, thanks for that. So now I'm going to get into where you actually start with all of these processes, because you might be an established business that's sitting there going, oh my word, I don't have any of these things done. Where do I even begin? It becomes completely overwhelming. Or even if you are still early stage, how do you make sure that you get these done properly? And there's a really cool, simple way that I've discovered that works very well, and it makes the process digestible. You can stagger it and make sure everything gets done, and it really takes into consideration all the various areas that you need to think about. So firstly, there are 2 types of processes: core processes and non-core processes. And the fundamental difference between these two is that core processes are things that you have to do. they can't be outsourced, and they can't be compromised. So this is what forms the fundamental core of your business. You need to make sure these are on point. And then you have your non-core processes. So while these are very important and they have to be done correctly, and they also have to be on point, these are things that you can potentially consider outsourcing, or maybe bringing in a junior or something like that. But it becomes those things that it's not 100% necessary for you as a business to do. So that's really how we separate these things and understand which is core and non-core. And then it's really just kind of at the bottom of all of this, understanding what is the best way for the owner or the senior team to spend their time. And the reason why I focus more on kind of the owner and the senior team is because they are generally your most expensive resources. They are your most strategic resources. They are your most important resources. So you need to make sure they are spending their time correctly. I had a conversation once with a guy who had just started a new delivery business. So he was doing food delivery. So this was about 7 or 8 years ago. So it was still quite a new thing. And he spoke about how much time he was taking doing all of these deliveries. So he was actually driving to people's houses and dropping these things off. And his reasoning behind it was that he actually didn't have the money to bring in somebody to do this for him. And I actually asked him, like, is this really the best use of your time? So yes, it might seem like a lot of money to pay somebody. I think it was probably 250 Rand or whatever it was at the time. But when you think of the opportunity costs of you spending hours and hours on the road, you're not bringing in new business. You're not thinking strategically. You are doing work that somebody else can do. So it's a non-core process. So fundamentally, just keep at the back of your mind, like, what is the best way for you as the owner and your senior team to spend their time? So this is a bit of a step-by-step guide into how you can go about getting all of this sorted. And I'm going to give you the steps and then sort of break it down as we move along. So firstly, when you are creating processes, it is very important that the key process holders be involved. So if you're a more established business, that could be your senior team. If you're just starting out, it could be your founding team. If you're a solopreneur, chances are it's just you. But I would highly recommend that you go through this process with somebody else, purely because it just gives you an objective opinion and another set of eyes, which is always very, very useful. The reason why it's important to make this very inclusive and not just, okay, well, Nicci, you're the operations person, so you do it. People buy into things that they have created. So if you and I have walked this journey of building this system, chances are I'm going to take greater ownership of it rather than it just becomes something that you impose on me. So besides the fact that you need different brains in the room, you actually really want people to buy into these, because that's the most effective way to get them done and to get people to adhere to them. So what you need to do is gather all of these ideas beforehand. And there is a Jamboard template. For those of you who aren't familiar with Jamboard, it's a Google app. And it's basically a whiteboard sticky note app where you can collaborate. So you can create pages and people can go and put all of their notes on it. So you can do this as a spreadsheet. You can, however you decide to do this, you need to get people thinking about this beforehand. And the reason why it's important to give a week or maybe even 2 weeks before is because there might be things that I don't think of in the moment. You know, when people say to you, who are your clients? And all of a sudden, like, you can't think of a single client, you just go completely blank. This is what will happen. So you need to give people time to give it some thought, and then, oh, there's this thing that I do. Maybe I need to put that down. Then when you're in the actual workshop itself, you discuss these further, you build on them, you add to them. And at this point, it's really important that you understand that too much information is a good thing. The more information you have, the better. It doesn't matter if it's repetitive, if they're duplicates, if they're things that aren't really important. You need to focus on really getting everything down. That's the most important thing. And then you go through this sort of pruning process. So you can see why it's you need to start bigger and prune down, because if you start small and prune down, you're going to end up with a very small set of options. So you remove things, you combine them. This is a duplicate, this isn't important. You really get to the crux of what the business stands for. You put all of these things into categories that make sense for your business, and then you look at the action plan. So let's have a quick look at how we go about identifying our core processes. So there are 4 key questions that you need to ask. How are we acquiring business? How are we delivering on our promise? How are we collecting money? And how are we retaining clients? Because these really break things down into what needs to be done by you as a business. There are a lot of companies that offer lead generation, that might offer social media, all of those kind of things. If you go through this and you suddenly realize that actually lead generation is a fundamental process to us, we have to do it internally, you might make very different decisions around that, or outsourcing things like social media. So really understand how these things work. So this is basically, I mean, this is like a replica of the Jamboard that I made. So if we look at how we're acquiring business, dump everything on here. So you can see there are a couple of repetitions here: educational videos and content, social media advertising, every single thing you do that would bring in business. Maybe it is working with an outsourced lead gen company, email marketing, your advertising, your branding, speaking at public events. Every single thing needs to go on this. And then you go through this for each of these. So how are we delivering on our promise? When I share the Jamboard link with you, you'll actually see I've got a section that says, what is our promise? And getting back to what I said earlier, you need to understand what you are promising your clients. Because if you suddenly sit there and think, well, hang on a minute, what is my promise? You need to take a step back. And this is, it doesn't necessarily need to be something that you share with the world. It can be an internal phrase or line or whatever that you use. But what is your promise to your clients? So if you're me, my promise is business growth through operational excellence. So how do I deliver on that? So I have a kickoff briefing session with my clients. I do a team and client intro. I do a needs analysis. We sign a contract. So the reason why I've got sourcing raw materials on here is because I was using this as an example for a company that was making candles as well. So if you're in a manufacturing business, you would have a raw material process. They made candles that were organic, so they had to have supplier vetting. Service businesses have project scoping. So it's really putting all of these things down that relate to how you deliver on your promise to your clients. And sourcing raw materials, for argument's sake, that could be, in and of itself, could be a massive process. But the better it's documented, the easier it is to maintain and the easier it is to keep those standards going. So then you work through all of these sections. How are you collecting money? In my case, I work with a very small number of clients. So I don't really do a lot of invoicing. I mean, if I do 10 invoices in a month, that's quite a lot for me. But if you're in retail or manufacturing, or maybe you've got sort of an app, digital business where people are downloading a lot, how you're collecting money can be really important. So are you using a system like Stripe or PayPal, or, you know, is it digitized? What does it look like? If you retail, you know, where you kind of processing, or you want to be processing in excess of 50 orders a day, this section will be a lot busier. So understand, how are we collecting all of this money, and what's involved in it? Are we using a Zapper, SnapScan, Yoko machine? Where's all the money going? How does this whole thing work? And then finally, how are you retaining business or clients? How are you making sure that people come back? Because as much as, if we get back to the example of growing your business by 50%, it is more expensive to acquire clients than it is to keep clients. And if you make a strategic decision to part ways with a client, that's a separate conversation. But I want my clients to constantly be coming back. If I'm working with them on a project basis, when that project comes to an end, how do I make sure that we keep going? Maybe I can write a report with them for that recommends further actions. I can share new information with them. I can upsell new products. I can keep that relationship going. Maybe they only come back 3 or 4 months down the line, but I want to make sure they keep coming back. And it's actually something that you need to consider when you are creating these processes, because often once we get the money, cool, that's it, we're done. We've closed out the project. We now need to move on. And this is a really important element around business retention. So how can I make sure, even if it's in retail, if it's a digital business where you're working with an app, how do I make sure people keep buying from me? Because ideally, that's what I want. I want them to stay with me. So then we go and we sort all of these processes, as I said, into categories. And I've just done this with the example of acquiring business. So you can see I joined the Facebook and LinkedIn advertising, social media. You can delete one, whatever works. Okay, sorry, oops, I left those 2 duplicates there, but you would delete one of them. So if I divide my business acquisition actions into 2 categories, for me, it would be inbound activities and outbound activities. So how am I attracting people to my business, and how am I actively selling? And how you categorize these is entirely up to you. So if you look at the delivering on your promise, you could have a whole category, if you're in manufacturing, that looks at your raw material sourcing processes or your client vetting process. So for me, I created like a client onboarding process or category, and then like a client/project management category. So that was how I divided those 2. For collecting money, for me, it was pretty simple and straightforward, because as I said, there are a lot, my systems are quite simple around that. But that also made me realize, so if I just go back to the collecting money, because of the nature of my business, I don't need a full-time bookkeeper or accountant. That is a process that I can outsource without compromising my clients. So this will also help you understand, hang on, these are not core. Okay, so now we build an action plan. We go through the analysis, what is documented and what isn't documented. If nothing's documented, that's okay. You've started this, and that's the most important thing. And then these next sort of 3 points, you need to look at them holistically. So what are the biggest pain points? Where's your biggest headache? What will have the biggest impact? And what can be done quickly? And the reason why we need to sort of look at these together is because if you look at speed, for instance, so yes, there might be things that I look at and I go, okay, well, I can do that very quickly. If I have 20 things that I can do very quickly, all of a sudden it's not very quick. And suddenly it's going to be taking up a lot of time. So take into account, what are your biggest pain points? What is the biggest impact? Because maybe there would be one. So for me, for instance, my client onboarding process has the biggest impact on everything else, because that's where we set the expectations, that's where we sort out the contracts, that's where we agree on payment terms. It's all of those kind of things, and it has a knock-on effect on everything else. So that for me was a really important thing to get right. And it was also becoming my biggest headache, because largely, and I'm sure a lot of you in the service industry have experienced this, a lot of the time we don't deliver on our promises because of misaligned expectations. So that can have a knock-on effect. But it's really important that you look at this kind of overall. So from a speed perspective, I could sort out my quoting my invoicing process very quickly, very easily. That was a 5-minute job. So I got that done, checked it off the list, and moved on. And then once again, I've given you guys a cool implementation plan. So the promise sits at the top again, because I'm going to keep reminding you about that. And it looks at, so there are our core process categories, or our areas down the side, our categories, what needs to be done, who is responsible, and when it needs to be done by. So it's really breaking that down. And maybe you look at this and it's getting done over 6 months, and that's absolutely fine, but you know who needs to do what and by when. So are there any questions around this? Because we are running a little bit low on time. I do have areas in this handout about understanding your core business and looking at business analytics. I don't get too deep into those because they do tend to be very business specific. So I think if we can stop this here and get into any questions or any discussions, and yeah, then you can work through those areas when you get the handout.
Thanks, Nick. Malebo has his hand up.
Go for it, Malebo.
Thank you, Liesl. Just to go back to the previous slides that you were presenting, the questions, asking yourself those questions, So I feel like it's not a once-off thing, it's like a kind of continuous iteration, throughout, whatever programs that you or initiatives that you have in your business. You keep asking yourself this question so you can refine more and more all the information that you've gathered for all the processes, to get a much clearer, outcome to what you're trying to achieve. So yeah, I really liked those questions that you were presenting,
Oh, that's great, Malebo. Thanks very much. And absolutely, I mean, I think that's a fantastic comment, that this does become something that you need to kind of check on a continuous basis, because maybe when you start out initially, I mean, if we let's just look at business retention for argument's sake, you might suddenly look at this and go, when I started my business, sharing useful information with clients was something that I did manually during our project closeout session. But now my business has moved on and I can use HubSpot to help me with that process. I can digitize that process. So it is a continuous improvement. And the sooner you get the bulk of this right, the easier it becomes to refine. Because when you first do this process, it's going to be big and it's probably going to be massive. But when you start refining it, suddenly we're not addressing 100 things. We're now only addressing 1 or 2. And we're tweaking and we're making things better. That's, yeah, great comment, Malebo. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it touches on continuous learning all the time as well. That enables continuous improvement. Craig has his hand up.
Yeah, no, it is really an excellent point. And I think it also, in this time of disruption, highlights the point that what we also need to revisit is our business models, because what the disruption that's happening is doing is it's killing old business models. So, you're going to do this process on your existing business model, but you actually need to review your business model as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Then Paul, you're welcome to come online if you would like. Paul's comment in the chat, Nicci, is any guidelines on where to set the level of granularity for defining process? Paul, you're welcome to come online if you would like to clarify that a little bit further. And if you're shy, Nicci can respond maybe.
That's fine. I'll respond. And if you need any clarity, Paul, you're welcome to. I'm going to stop sharing my screen if that's okay.
100%.
Just so I can start seeing people, because I've got faces. That's so cool. Paul, so in terms of the level of granularity, it really depends on your action plan. So looking at what is the most important and how deep do you feel you need to go with this, and what is appropriate. So if you are a business that has scaled and has employed a lot of people, that generally requires a much deeper level of granularity. But that also depends on the team you're working with. Are they comfortable to have that little bit of wiggle room? Are you comfortable to give them that little bit of wiggle room? Or do you actually want things very specific? So if you take a manufacturing company, for instance, the the label needs to go on at exactly this point, for instance, and that cannot be compromised. So you need to measure 1.78 mils, and you need to do this, and then you need to get really, really granular. When you're working with client onboarding and you're possibly dealing with generally a team that's more experienced, a little bit sophisticated, then it can become guidelines. So it really depends on the situation, and go with your gut as the business owner, as a senior team. And as we said, this is a continuous improvement process. So you might get to a certain level and go, actually, hang on, this is not working. That these guys are not understanding my my expectations of them, and they're missing the process. So we actually need to go deeper, and I need to give them more detail.
Thanks. I mentioned that, or raised that point, because when it comes to, often having described processes and so on, you get to a point where it's not a process anymore, it becomes an instruction.
Absolutely.
And then people defer to it, like, well, this description is going to think for me. And that really kills the process, and you start losing the benefit. So, at some stage you got to stop that and maybe do something else,
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would like to add.
Oh, sorry,
Nicci, go for it.
No, I was just going to say, it also does depend on as I said, the industry, but the level of sophistication of your team. I find when you're dealing with juniors, sometimes it's better for them to actually have that instruction until they learn and they get the experience and the knowledge to start interpreting things, and then you can give them that little bit of wiggle room. But at a junior level, you might want to keep them quite boxed in. But it's really, go with your gut.
Yeah, I think, one thing that I know we use this word mindset a lot, but as and there's a lot of people who resist thinking around operations, putting processes in place. We manage through processes, and the better we manage through it and digitize that process as well is quite beneficial. But what do you think, Nicci, about helping your team, helping yourself to start off with, but then also your team to develop a thing called an operations mindset? Because there's this seems to be, and a point that did come across in some of the statements that were made, is it's not a negative, this. It's, if we achieve this excellence, we enable so much more we enable innovation, we enable creative thinking,
Absolutely.
we enable team. What's your thoughts around adopting an operational excellence mindset? Solopreneur or SME, doesn't matter.
Yeah, look, obviously I'm going to be a big fan of that, but I think the reason why I'm a big fan of that is because it's not necessarily an operational excellence mindset. It's a mindset of excellence. And sometimes it might be more useful to position it that way. But if you take, for instance, the famous case study that people always use is Zappos in the US, where the staff are just so dedicated to being fantastic to clients and bending over backwards to help them and doing what they need to do and going above and beyond. That is a strong operationally excellent mindset. Sorry, my English is failing me today. And I don't have a backup language, so it's a bugger. But it is a mindset of excellence. It doesn't necessarily have to be labeled as operationally, but it is that mindset that will drive your business forward. And as you were saying about getting granular, it's also where you can learn where I need to go above and beyond. That actually, hang on, this process is now stifling my ability to service my clients. I need to be able to have a conversation with my superior or the owner of the business to say, look, maybe we need to relook this, because it is so constraining that I can't do my job. When you speak to people often in call centers, and they literally can only do this, and then they have to transfer you to another department, and you're ripping your hair out because I'm now on department number 4 and I'm about to lose my mind. But that's all they can do, and that's all the process allows them to do. So it's not necessarily creating that environment. But I mean, Liesl, I think that's a very powerful thing to entrench, and it gets back to right in the when we first started, I spoke about your people and your culture, and it should be that culture of excellence, of innovation, of doing what you need to do, and it is all operationally minded. And I think this is why I feel so passionately about getting the operations right, because it is the engine that makes everything else happen. So if you take a car's engine, you can have the most beautiful body of the car, the awesome mag wheels, the whole lot. If the engine isn't working properly, that car is never going to go the way you want it to. So it really is, it's this thing that sits in the middle, and it's really important. But I love that that notion of an operational excellence mindset.
Are there any questions for Nicci? You're more than welcome to unmute. I apologize for being away for a wee bit, but I'm back.
No problem.
Any questions? You're more than welcome. We do have time for a couple of questions. Anything anybody would like to share from their experience, maybe? What worked for them in consideration of the topic? Craig says in the chat, create your digital engine.
I love that.
Craig, please talk to us about that. If you don't mind, Nicci.
No. Well, I mean, it's taking everything that Nicci's saying and digitizing it to the furthest possible extent, so that you're not working in the business, doing all the admin yourself, running all the processes yourself, and you're working on the business, which is with your clients, keeping your clients satisfied. And I think the one thought that I had about this when Nicci was talking about what to outsource, and then talking about documenting your processes and making sure that everybody understands how your business runs. It's very important to do that with the services that you outsource and with the systems that you outsource. So if you buy a CRM system, for example, don't expect it to magically keep your clients happy. Those processes that you need to, the CRM systems need to support the processes that you need. You can't take a CRM system off the shelf and expect it to magically give you happy clients, as an example.
Absolutely. And I mean, Craig, it gets back to what you were saying earlier. Just because I've got QuickBooks, which is a very good, very efficient accounting package that helps me track my invoices and helps me follow up on outstanding invoices and all of those kind of things, QuickBooks doesn't earn me money. So it's the financial elements that are sitting behind that system. So yeah, I completely agree with you. We need to understand that the software and the digitization helps enhance what is already existing. It's not going to do it for us. And also just understanding, I mean, I've had experiences with clients that have moved from manual processes as existing businesses into a more digitized, as in this instance, it was actually a CRM solution. And initially it was a fantastic solution, but initially it failed miserably, because the change management process around that actually wasn't handled correctly. So also just understand that a lot of the time as entrepreneurs, we're very quick at adopting things, and we try things and we test them, and we're happy to go out and give it our best shot and fail and then fix it and try again. Our staff might not be like that. So if you are introducing new technologies, manage the change around that and make sure it gets done properly. And personally, a lot of the time I would recommend, there is a lot of open source software available, and it's great. Just be a little bit careful around what kind of open source you get, because a lot of the systems like Asana and those sort of existing systems, they come with great training packages. Or if you get a package from a company, they will include training. But I have come across businesses where they've gotten open source software, it doesn't come with training, and the CEO has ended up doing the training, which once again, is that really the best use of your time? So just take those things into consideration. Conway, I'm just going to take Malebo's question and then I'll answer your question in the chat. Malebo, go for it.
Thank you, Nicci. I just also wanted to highlight what Paul mentioned about automation of processes. You know, yeah, it's also becoming one of a great support that can help your digital processes. You know, like for example, when you mentioned it, automation can help you process 24/7. You know, so instead of having people working day and another shift working night, you know, the whole automation can handle that for you. So it's something that most businesses should also look out for, you know, in the near future as it grows attention. Yeah.
Absolutely. Malebo, fully agree with you. Thanks very much for that. Conway, just in terms of free CRM systems, it does depend on your business. So I have found it personally, I use Asana. I use the free version. That's why I keep referring to it, because I am familiar with it. But there are, so Trello is another very good system. HubSpot have got really good CRM elements to it. It depends what you need it for. So if you're just looking at some sort of sales CRM system, there's specific ones for that. If you're looking at something that is broader and covers all the different areas, you might need to, somebody mentioned Zapier earlier, you might need to set up those integrations with different kind of Zaps. So depending on the size of your company, it might be a little bit beyond you. But I have found that for me, from a service perspective, Asana and Trello are more than sufficient, and they are both free. And I also use HubSpot, which is great. It's my sales CRM system. So I have a lot of these things. I have an email system. I use ConvertKit. So there are a lot of individual ones that I use. There are also really good paid for systems that will kind of cover all of these. I'm happy to share those as well. But from a free version, those are probably the best CRM systems that you can get for a service business. Manufacturing, that tends to be a little bit more complicated. So I would not necessarily look at some sort of a free management system if you're in manufacturing. Sorry, John's just... Oh, sorry,
Yes.
Lisa.
No, go for it. I was just going to bring your attention to John's comment.
There was a reference to KPIs. These measure performance. How much focus should be applied to KPIs? There are key result indicators that also show where the performances are being measured are turning into. I think, you know, in terms of focusing on KPIs, personally, I like quite a strong focus on them because it does provide clarity. And if you've set all of your action plans and those kind of things up correctly, it does give very clear KPIs, and it just helps give people that guidance around what they need to do. So I really like a strong focus on KPIs because it makes people comfortable. It helps them understand. It helps you track what I mean, as Liesl said, if things are going off course, it makes it a lot easier to bring them back. But KPIs can also be tricky because you need to take a whole lot of steps back before you can put clear KPIs in place. So if your action plans and what you want to achieve is not clear, your KPIs are going to be skewed and they're potentially going to be messed up, and you're going to set people up for failure. And I'm a big believer in setting yourself and your staff up for success. Maybe I'm the eternal optimist, but I don't believe that anybody shows up to fail. They show up to do their best. And when their best is not aligned with you, it's often due to poor expectations or poor job descriptions or poor KPIs. So if you do that work right, then your KPIs will be strong. And I believe in quite a strong focus on that and setting people up correctly.
I would like to add some food for thought on this. What I've seen changes and influences people's performance and my personal performance. Remember, it starts with us first, not with our staff first, and employees first, is if we start talking outcomes. What are the outcomes that we would like to achieve here? Because often KPIs and KRIs are written in such a way that it brings in that disciplined negativity attached to that, versus what are we going to achieve together as an outcome, and how does that align with what we are trying to achieve as an organization. That seems to bring a little bit of a different tone to the conversation with yourself. I do talk to me, myself, and I sometimes, but also within your employees. So what's your opinion on outcomes? This is unfortunately the last comment that we can take, then we need to wrap up. Thanks, Nicci.
Absolutely. Liesl, I think everything should be linked to outcomes. It's pointless telling me as a salesperson that you have made 100 calls or sent 100 emails or written 5 proposals. Yes, those are all necessary steps to get to the outcome, but I'm concerned about how much business you are converting. And I think that the outcomes thinking has become so much more important now that so many people are working remotely, because there was this massive mindset shift when people started working from home, because before it was all about bums on seats and I could see whether you were sitting at your desk and working or not. And I've had conversations with a lot of people from big corporates who said, well, we actually had to let people go because all of a sudden they just weren't performing. And I said, but were they ever performing, or were they just spending a lot of time at their desks? So I think outcomes thinking is critical. It has always been critical, but it's becoming more critical. Treat people like adults, give them the expectations. And if they are working remotely, like a lot of people are, if I work best from 3 o'clock in the morning until midday and I'm producing my outcomes, does it make a difference that I'm not working the traditional 8 to 5? Outcomes thinking is key, and it's going to become more and more important as we move forward. And there needs to be a lot of mindset shift around outcomes, not hours.
Thank you very much for that, Nicci. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I've got some good news here. It was a tough topic, this, and a very niche topic, and a topic many people choose to avoid. But we are going to help people realize the value in the great work that Nicci's doing. So Nicci is launching some knowledge nuggets with us from next week. So I am managing some future outcomes here, Nicci, if you haven't noticed. No pressure, because this is such a critical and important topic. So I think that's very exciting, and in those nuggets, Nicci is going to dive deep into more of the content that she has shared. So that's very exciting, and watch this space. So just before we do a proper thank you to Nicci, I have a few things that I would like to share from us at ExoFutures. You might have seen some other links popping up there. So I'm just going to share my screen for a wee bit. It's just going to be a short little moment. We always share what's coming up next and what you can see next and hear next. And as a very nice follow-up from today, I think is Michael Lee's masterclass next week, where he's actually going to help us see the opportunity within uncertainty. And he's going to take us through 3 of his 10 steps. And we're already preparing Michael's MVC launch and knowledge launches with us, so that you can immediately register for that as well next week. So he's going to help us with achieve personal success and business success, with changing our mindsets around this thing called uncertainty. So he's going to use laughter, we're going to dance, we're going to interact in breakout sessions. So if you want to start your new weekend next week, as well as start changing and how you view uncertainty, this is the masterclass to attend. I did put that registration link in the chat, and I'll share that in a moment again. The other links I've also shared is we've launched some minimal viable courses with some of our guest speakers. So they come here, they want to share, they have an abundance mindset, they know that they've got knowledge and experience that will help you be be successful. We then turn that into minimal viable courses. That link I've also shared where you can go and register for these courses. And then it's a wonderful, beautiful thing that we have launched called Knowledge Nuggets, which is a collection of nuggets on short, concise, and very focused learning objectives. And this is one of the things that Nicci will start with us next week. So go and register. We've got a bundle offer there of some of the existing nuggets. Again, it's from our community members to help you succeed. And then, of course, contact us. Our email addresses has been shared. Join our LinkedIn community, and you see the link in there for bit.ly/DE past events. The collateral from this masterclass, as well as all the assets that will be shared, and the various links, Nicci, that I've shared from you within the Zoom chat will be made available. So I just want to say, Nicci, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure welcoming you as a guest speaker. And thank you to everybody for joining us and taking time out of your very busy days. Every day is a busy day these days. And I hope you found the investment that you made in yourself today valuable. In closing, Nicci and Craig, I think maybe to start with Nicci, do you have any last parting words of encouragement and so on for our audience, for our community members here?
Absolutely. I have many words in a day. I have a lot to get through, so I always have lots of words. But Liesl, thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful experience. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you to the ExoFutures team for all of your support. And thank you so much, everybody who showed up today. I really appreciate it. And I hope you found it useful. And I do appreciate the investment of your time, because I know what an important resource time is. And my last message to you, it's the message that I always give to business owners out there at the moment. Our world needs strong leaders, people who are brave, people who are willing to challenge the status quo. And I think a lot of that is going to come from business owners, because we have the capability to shift things, to create jobs, to innovate, to do amazing things. So I just ask all of you to please go out there. It is scary. It is overwhelming. This is not an easy path that you've taken, but go out and just be brave and cause chaos, because we need leaders who are willing to cause chaos. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicci. Craig?
Awesome, Nicci. Thank you so much. And that, you're making the act harder and harder to follow, because I was going to say something similar, that, net new jobs really come from communities like this. They're not going to come from corporates. So we have to make that happen, and we have to help each other to scale by helping each other to digitize is what we're trying to do. And that's not just about, digitizing your knowledge nuggets and the video content that comes out of masterclasses like this and developing courses. It's also about systematizing and digitizing to automate what you do, so that we can scale these small businesses to help people to employ more and create more financial inclusion. So thank you so much, Nicci. Thank you, Liesl, as always. And that's it from me. See you guys next.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely weekend, and we look forward to welcoming you back next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.